I was never enough. In our Portland home, my brother Caleb's every move was celebrated, while I, Lily, faded into the shadows. 4 years older, he was their star. My efforts earned only nods. What did it take to be seen in my own family? I still remember clearly one evening when I was 10. I had filled everything out, a completed application for a weekend photography workshop at the local community center. Even attached a black and white photo I was really proud of. She read it, smiled gently, and placed a hand on my shoulder. Maybe next term, sweetheart. I just paid for Caleb's advanced piano lessons. I simply nodded, took the form back to my room, and tucked it into my desk drawer. I never mentioned it again. It was different with Caleb. As soon as his music teacher said he had potential, my parents sprang into action. They hired a private music tutor, bought a professional keyboard, and even turned our dining room into a home studio. His practice sessions stretched for hours every evening while Mom beamed with pride. He's going to make something of himself. Meanwhile, I studied in my room, trying to focus through the noise and constant praise. When I once asked to attend a summer writing workshop, the answer was always, "The family budget's a bit tight right now." Tight. A soft way of saying, everything went to Caleb. Dinners were always the same. Caleb talked, our parents listened. He'd share news about his latest composition, new friends, upcoming recitals. I sat quietly, cutting my broccoli, waiting for a chance to say I got an A in history, but by the end of the meal, I still hadn't spoken a word. When Caleb entered high school, the difference grew even more obvious. If a teacher praised him, Mom would immediately tell relatives and neighbors. But when my teacher texted that I was an excellent student, Mom simply replied, "Thanks," and put her phone away like the message never happened. By the time I was 13, I understood one thing. If I wanted anything in life, I'd have to get it myself. I stopped expecting, stopped asking, stopped explaining. I became an expert at swallowing my words and smiling like nothing was wrong. Once I asked my dad why Caleb always got more attention. He hesitated, then said, "Caleb truly has talent. You're good too. But he's got the kind of potential that can go far." I turned away, hiding the tear that was about to fall. Not because what he said was too harsh, but because it confirmed what I always felt. I was never the first choice in my own family. Ever since my dad said those words, I stopped waiting for recognition from my family. The summer I turned 16, while Caleb was preparing to start college with a full scholarship to Pacific University and a fully furnished apartment, leased in our parents' name, I quietly went out looking for a part-time job. I didn't have many options. For a teenage girl without a driver's license, getting around a small city like Portland wasn't easy. But luckily, my grandparents, owners of a small vintage bookstore on the edge of town, gave me a chance. The first day I showed up, my grandfather pointed to a dusty pile of old novels and said, "If you can handle the smell and don't mind cleaning, this place is yours starting today." I nodded, no hesitation. Every afternoon after school, I took a bus, nearly a 35-minute ride, to the shop. The work wasn't glamorous, dusting, organizing, shelving, and occasionally helping Grandma ring up sales. But I gradually fell in love with the old books full of history. Every leather-bound journal or faded postcard held a story, a sharp contrast to the silence I'd grown used to in my own home. She often said, "You may not be the center of someone else's world, but don't forget, you are the whole sky in your own." I remembered every word. 4 years passed. While Caleb was being driven around in a new SUV, living rent-free, and getting weekly allowances from our parents, I was still riding the bus home every night, sleeves scented with old paper and ink. I wasn't jealous of him. I just stayed busy. I saved every penny from the shop, kept every receipt, and enrolled in the state university, not as prestigious as Pacific, but affordable with a solid marketing program. I chose the practical path, not the flashy one. When I received my acceptance letter, I printed the PDF and taped it to my bedroom door. No one asked, no one congratulated me. At the time, Caleb was in his senior year of college and had just landed an internship offer in Seattle. My mom was overjoyed, like he'd won the lottery. I sat at the dinner table, quietly picking at my asparagus, like I was invisible. I thought even if I got into Yale, she'd probably just nod and move on. I chose to study locally and stayed at home to save money on rent. That meant waking up at 5 a.m. every morning to catch the first bus and working evening shifts at a nearby bakery after classes. I didn't have time to complain. Instead, I built a detailed budget plan, took free online courses, and slowly built up a small fund I called my freedom account. It wasn't just money. It was the belief that one day I'd be strong enough to walk away from this place. I never once asked my parents for a dime toward my education. I even chipped in monthly for the internet bill. Still, they would often say, "Lily, you're so responsible." Not like Caleb. He calls me every time he needs something. I'd smile. But something inside me grew colder. Caleb was still their pride and joy. He graduated with a grand celebration cake, fresh orchids, guests, even a professional photographer to capture every moment. When I finished my freshman year with a perfect GPA, my parents sent me a single text. "Well done." I got used to it. Instead of seeking attention, I poured all my energy into work and school. I knew that patience and independence were my ticket out of a cycle of favoritism I never signed up for. What I didn't know was that someday the very money I saved through sweat and sacrifice would become a target not by strangers, but by the very people who shared my blood. And when that day came, it wouldn't just be a lesson about kindness. It would be a brutal wake-up call about the final limits of endurance. Clearvale, I'd graduated the spring I turned 22. I still remember the day. I was restocking croissants at the campus bakery when my mom called, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Lily, Caleb just proposed to his girlfriend and she said yes." I wiped my hands on my apron, trying to sound neutral. "Really? That's great. Tell him congratulations." I didn't need to ask who it was. Since his sophomore year, Mom had been talking about Sarah, the brunette girl in his music program in Seattle. Every time she mentioned her, she called her the kind of girl worthy of Caleb, as if the entire world had only one type of person suitable for our family. Not long after, the official announcement was posted on our family group chat and on my mom's social media. Caleb and Sarah were getting married in July at a luxury vineyard in Napa Valley. Attached was an entire photo album of the proposal at dusk with a hot air balloon in the sky and a diamond ring nearly the size of a grape. I skimmed through it, then went back to my unfinished marketing assignment. But that was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, during dinner, my parents informed me that they had decided to take out another loan to fund a proper wedding for Caleb. "This is the most important day of our son's life," my mom said, eyes gleaming. "He deserves the best. The vineyard, a string quartet, a 7-course meal, even a light show." I gently set my fork down and asked quietly, "What about the car loan that's still unpaid?" My dad avoided my eyes. My mom gave a soft laugh. "Don't worry. Your father and I have it all figured out, as long as Caleb and Sarah are happy." I didn't say another word. I knew no matter what I said, I would always be just an outsider in these decisions. So, from April to July, our house turned into wedding headquarters for an event that cost nearly $62,000, 0 cents. My mom took a leave of absence from work to fully focus on the wedding. Meanwhile, I kept working morning shifts at the bakery, going to school in the afternoon, and helping clean up in the evenings because the house was overflowing with wedding gifts, ribbons, and place cards. One day, my mom handed me a large cardboard box and said, "Here's your bridesmaid dress. Try it on and see if it fits." Inside was a lavender chiffon gown, and tucked into a side pocket, a receipt for almost $420, 0 cents. I looked up and asked gently, "Am I paying for this myself?" She looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You're an adult now, Lily. It's your responsibility." I've already had to juggle enough just to afford the string quartet. I nodded and said nothing more. That night, I sat in front of my laptop and quietly made the payment on my credit card. It was my biggest expense that month, and the first time I ever cried over a dress. The wedding went exactly as they had dreamed, extravagant, sparkling, filled with laughter and twinkling lights. I wore the expensive bridesmaid dress, stood beside the happy couple, smiled under the fairy lights, and played my part perfectly. No one knew that the night before the wedding, I had to walk nearly 3 miles from the bus stop home because I'd missed the last ride. No one asked how many hours I'd slept that week while helping set up, but they were too busy celebrating Caleb's happiness. After the reception, when all the guests had left, I stood at the sink helping Grandma wash glasses. She looked at me and said softly, "I'm proud of you, Lily. Not for standing on stage, but for standing strong when no one was behind you." I smiled. A genuine smile, a rare one. That day, I thought everything would be over after that. I was wrong. 1 year later, Caleb and Sarah suddenly announced they were moving to Boise to manage a new branch of Sarah's family business. My parents sent them off with tears, long hugs, and a starter support fund of nearly $15,000, 0 cents, pulled from a second mortgage they never once mentioned to me. I stood at the door watching them leave, and my chest felt strangely cold. Not from jealousy, but from a gut feeling that from here on, the weight wouldn't fall on Caleb anymore. It would fall on me. After Caleb and Sarah's wedding, the apartment my parents had rented for him near Pacific University was left empty. I knew that apartment well. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, an open kitchen, and a sunny balcony. It was just under a 12-minute walk from the campus where I studied. At the time, I was in my final year of college, juggling full-time classes and 2 part-time jobs just to stay afloat. Every morning felt like a race against the clock, and the city buses were almost always late. I was starting to feel burnt out. On a Saturday night, after a long evening shift at the bakery, I cautiously brought up the apartment with my parents. "I know Caleb's apartment is sitting empty now. If it's possible, I'd like to move in. It would make studying and working much easier." My mom looked up from her phone, glanced at my dad, then replied flatly, "If you want to live there, you'll need to pay rent." "But Caleb didn't pay," I blurted out. The air in the room turned heavy. My dad folded his tablet and said in a level voice, "The financial situation is different now, Lily. We just took another loan to cover Caleb's wedding. We can't afford to support you both." I pressed my lips against it. They weren't wrong. They had the right to set terms for their property, but the double standard was undeniable. In the end, I agreed to pay half the market rate, just as my mom proposed, covering all living expenses and utilities myself. That weekend, I moved in. The living room walls still had tape marks from Caleb's old band posters. Scuff marks on the hardwood from his last house party hadn't been cleaned. I didn't complain. At the very least, this was the first space in my life I could finally call home. The following month, I graduated from college with honors. While my friends threw celebration parties, my parents sent me a pre-printed card that said, "Proud of you. No cake, no flowers, no family dinner." I let it go because something better had come. I was offered a job at Crestview Partners, a well-known marketing firm downtown with a starting salary far beyond what I'd expected. I shared the news with my parents over the weekend. My mom listened, then said flatly, "Good. So starting next month, you'll pay full rent?" I froze. "But we agreed I'd only pay half until I was stable." "Well, you're stable now," she cut in without hesitation. "A big company like that, good salary too. There's no reason you shouldn't pay in full." I didn't argue. I'd learned that every conversation like this had the same outcome. I would always have to give in. From then on, I transferred the full amount on time every month, not a single dollar late. I kept working hard, waking up at 5:30 a.m., leaving the office at 6:30 p.m., returning to that worn-down apartment in silence, eating a quick dinner, and then diving into more project work. I stopped calling home often. Every call was either about rent or Caleb and Sarah's updates, how they'd just moved into a new house in Boise under Sarah's family name. They were expecting a baby. Caleb was mentioned in a local business article. Whenever Mom shared those things, I stayed quiet. I had learned how to listen without feeling hurt. It was a skill no one taught me, one I had to master on my own. One late night, I received an email from HR. I was being considered for a promotion to assistant project manager. I had only been working there 9 months, and I was already on the internal advancement list. I was so happy, I just sat on the couch for hours, stunned. I didn't call my parents. I didn't want my success turned into another excuse to raise the rent. A few days later, I opened the door to find my mom standing there with an envelope in hand. "Just stopping by to check on you," she said, placing the envelope on the table. I opened it. Inside was a notice of rent adjustment, a 20% increase starting next month. I looked at her, trying to stay calm. "What's the reason this time?" "Rising costs, and now that you've got a new position, right?" she said casually. I nodded, then walked straight into my room and closed the door. This apartment had never truly been mine, and if I stayed, I would forever be just a walking wallet in their eyes. But I didn't leave right away, because I had a plan, and I wanted them to be the first to face the consequences when it was carried out. I had just finished an important meeting when my phone buzzed. It was my mom calling. "Lily, we need to talk about Caleb." I sat in the car, still holding my cup of hot tea. Her voice softened like something was off. "The company in Boise went bankrupt. Sarah's family is furious. They say Caleb messed with the records, overspent the budget without reporting. It turned into a big fight. Now they want the house, the car, and even custody of the baby if there's a divorce." I closed my eyes. My gut instinct, once again, was chillingly accurate. Mom continued, voice more rushed now. "Caleb, Sarah, and baby Mason need a place to stay for now. You know the apartment you're renting is the biggest one, and it has 2 bedrooms." I opened my eyes and sat upright. "You're planning to move them in with me?" The silence on the other end stretched long. Then Mom said something that almost made me drop my tea. "They'll stay rent-free for a while, but you'll keep paying the full rent like usual." I let out a bitter laugh, not that she could hear it. "I've been paying full rent on this apartment for 3 years now. Now you want Caleb's whole family to live here and I'm just supposed to, what? Keep funding it? It's only for a few months. I know you'll understand," she said. I hung up without another word. But inside, my answer was crystal clear. This wasn't a request. It was an order. And I knew I no longer had a say. 4 days later, Caleb and his family showed up with an entire carload of luggage, baby toys, a crib, a rocker, and even a fancy juicer that cost more than anything I'd ever owned. Sarah didn't say a word when she walked in, just glanced around like she was evaluating the quality of her temporary space. My mom came along too, walked around the apartment, then pointed to my bedroom. "This room is quiet enough for Mason, Lily. You can sleep on the sofa for now." I stood still. "I'm the one paying rent. This is my room. Your kid isn't a newborn. You don't need that much space." "Babies need a stable environment. Don't you understand?" she shot back. I wanted to say that I had once been a child too, one who had needed her own quiet corner to dream and rest, but never got it. Instead, I stayed silent. I packed my personal things neatly and moved out to the sofa by the window. The next 4 months were a waking nightmare. I became the unpaid maid, the reluctant cook, and the sole financial provider of the entire apartment. Caleb didn't work. He lounged in the living room all day, scrolling through his phone, watching old videos from his successful days, sighing dramatically. Sarah didn't work either. She ran errands or shopped while leaving me right after my long shifts. No one asked if I was tired. No one cared if I needed peace. The meals I cooked disappeared within 10 minutes. Dishes piled up. Baby clothes were draped across the balcony. The utility bills tripled. When I finally brought up the idea of them pitching in, my mom called me that same evening, her voice sharp. "Lily, stop being selfish. Your brother's going through a tough time. He used to have it all. Now he's lost everything. Can't you carry a little for your family?" I laughed quietly. "I've been carrying since I was 16, Mom." That night, I sat at the kitchen table, now covered in baby stickers, reviewing my bank statements. The numbers didn't lie. At this rate, I wouldn't be able to afford rent much longer. Then, one night, I overheard a conversation between Caleb and my mom in the living room. They didn't know I was home. "Don't worry," Mom said. "I'll take half of Lily's rent each month and give it to you. Think of it as remote support." "That's perfect," Caleb replied, sounding relieved. "At least someone in this house gets it." I stood frozen, chills running down my spine. They weren't just taking space. They were using me like a bottomless wallet. The next evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened my laptop and revisited the folder I had named Freedom, where I had saved apartment listings. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I had lived my whole life in silence. It was time to break it. After my brother and Sarah moved into my place temporarily, I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. But I was wrong. On a Wednesday morning, while I was rushing through a dry piece of toast before my online meeting, my mom suddenly showed up at my apartment door, holding a stack of papers. "Lily, we need to talk about the rent." I looked up, quickly swallowing my bite. "I paid it on time this month." She placed the papers on the table calmly, pulling out a printed notice. Starting next month, the rent will double. The room fell silent. I set my tea down and looked her straight in the eyes. Double? Are you serious? You can see for yourself, she began. There are more people living here now, more water, more electricity, more wear on the appliances. You have a steady job, Lily. You should be helping the family more. I leaned back in my chair, trying to stay composed. And Caleb? He still isn't paying a cent? He's going through a crisis. He lost everything. But you have everything right now? Don't be petty, she said. I gave a dry laugh. The everything she mentioned? An apartment I paid for, sleeping on a sofa, cooking meals I rarely got to eat, working nonstop, all while being treated like a money Spencer. That night, I reviewed my bank statements and budget again. If the rent really doubled, almost my entire income would go just to keeping this place where I didn't even have my own space. Something didn't add up. My gut told me there was something darker behind this. In one rare moment, my mom left her phone on the kitchen counter. A notification from Caleb popped up. Mom, can you send $500 0 cents this week? Sarah wants that stroller for Mason, the one she saw at Nordstrom. It's really nice. Then another message followed. Oh, and if Lily asks, just say it's for electrical repairs, okay? My chest tightened. I opened the phone. Mom never thought I'd snoop. A long thread of texts appeared. For the past 4 months, every time I transferred my rent, my mom had been secretly giving half of it to Caleb and Sarah, calling it emotional support to help them through a tough time. I stood frozen. It wasn't the money. It was the betrayal. Done in secret. No warning. No, thank you. That night, once everyone had gone to sleep, I sat alone on the balcony, wrapped in a thin blanket. I stared at the glowing windows of far-off buildings and wondered if one of them belonged to someone like me, someone who once believed hard work would be enough. It was wrong. I went back to the living room, which also served as my bedroom, opened my laptop and typed in search terms. 1-bedroom apartment near downtown, no roommate lease, private space only. After an hour of searching, I found it. A quiet, modest building 12 minutes from my office. The landlord was a kind, middle-aged woman. All she required was a stable income and someone who respected the space. I sent an email requesting a showing the very next morning. The next day was Tuesday. While preparing materials for a presentation, my mom called again, this time with an unusually sweet tone. Lily, I just talked to Caleb. Could you transfer the rent today? I'm planning to split it up and send half to the kids for groceries this weekend. I paused for a few seconds, then replied, Of course, Mom, but this will be the last time. She hesitated. What do you mean? I didn't respond. I just smiled gently, like someone folding the final letter before sending it off. It just needed 24 more hours. 24 hours to finish everything I had been quietly preparing for over a week. I had already signed the lease for a new apartment, a small, tidy 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of a quiet building exactly a 10-minute walk from my office. The landlord was a kind, elderly widow whose only request was no noise, no drama. I'd promised her I'd had more than enough drama in my life, mostly from people who shared my blood. I'd bought the biggest suitcase I could find online with same-day delivery. After work, I began quietly packing my things in the apartment I once called home, now nothing more than a place I deposited my paycheck and dignity. I didn't touch anything that wasn't mine. I left the chairs, the table, the juicer never used. I packed only my clothes, laptop, a few books, 1 bedside lamp, and the only things that were truly mine: silence, patience, and a will that could no longer be broken. That night, Caleb was glued to his old music videos on YouTube, and Sarah was brushing her hair in what used to be my bedroom, now called Mason's quiet nap room. I taped a small note to the fridge. Don't look. Don't call. And don't expect another dime. Then, at 1:45 a.m., I quietly wheeled my 2 suitcases down the hallway, where I had lived for 3 years, both as a tenant and as a puppet. I had never seen the Portland sky feel so peaceful. No shouting, no baby cries. Just one Lily, dragging her luggage down the sidewalk, walking toward freedom. My new apartment wasn't big, But no one there demanded rent just to hand it over to someone else. No one called me selfish for not wanting to support grown adults. No eyes looked at me like I was an ATM with legs. The next morning, I sat on the empty floor, tea in hand, and played soft violin music. As the notes echoed around the space, I knew I had just made the most important move of my life. A week passed, no calls, no messages. I exhaled. Then came the first of the month, the day I usually sent the rent. My phone rang. It was Mom. I didn't pick up. 4 hours later, a message came through. Lily, just a gentle reminder, today's rent is due. Caleb's planning to take Mason for a checkup, and I haven't been able to send them extra this week. I smiled, just as I expected. I typed each word slowly, deliberately. Mom, maybe you haven't realized. I moved out last week. You won't be receiving another cent. Not today, not next month, not ever. Less than 5 minutes later, the phone rang non-stop. I let it ring in silence. When I didn't answer, she sent a long message, half angry, half pleading. Lily, you're being unreasonable. You know your brother is going through a hard time. I only took part of your rent to help him get back on his feet. That's what family does. We share. How could you just walk away like this? I replied with one single line. Family isn't where one person carries everything and the others only take her. Less than a minute later, a new message came, this time from Caleb. So, you really bailed, huh? Congrats. Hope your new bed is big enough to hold all your selfishness. I read it and felt nothing. No anger, no resentment. 'Cause a strange, quiet relief because I was no longer trapped in a version of family built on duty and exploitation. I blocked their numbers after that. Every call, every message, every thread. That fall, the rain came earlier than usual. My little apartment was warmed by an old electric heater, but it still felt cozier than anywhere I'd ever lived, because there was no invisible coldness from the people who were supposed to love me. I had just finished the first term of my MBA with a straight A average. I'd started the program just to see if I could do it. But the more I studied, the more I felt like I had stepped into a new world, one where my worth was measured by knowledge, effort, and resilience, not by my last name or place in the family. At work, I was assigned to lead a collaborative project with the San Francisco office. During a short business trip, I met Owen, the head of strategy there, 8 years older than me and an alum of the same MBA program I was attending. We didn't fall into some movie-style romance, no lightning bolt, no late-night deep talk. It started with mutual respect. Then came short lunches, shared podcast suggestions, and eventually a peace I had never known around a man. Owen never asked about my family, but when I told him briefly, honestly, he just nodded. Some people have to leave in order to really live. I had gotten used to being strong on my own, but with someone beside me who didn't want to control or take from me, I realized strength doesn't have to mean solitude. We weren't in a rush. Both of us had our own past wounds, which made us even more careful, more clear. Owen didn't show up as some reward after years of pain. He was a quiet confirmation that I'd been walking in the right direction, and that there are still people in the world who respect boundaries. Meanwhile, through my grandma, I learned things were falling apart back home. Caleb and Sarah had maxed out their credit cards, couldn't afford Mason's daycare fees. My mom had started borrowing from friends to maintain appearances. The same people who once worshipped Caleb were now avoiding her calls. Grandma said my mom cried in the kitchen one day, repeating, "If only we hadn't let Lily go." But the truth is, they never had the power to let me go. I walked away on my own. And they just couldn't stop me anymore. I didn't hate them. Hate takes energy to maintain, and I had redirected all mine toward my career, my education, and myself. I began turning my experiences into essays, not to complain, but to give voice to others like me. I shared one on a forum for financially independent women, and it unexpectedly went viral. A week later, I was invited to speak at a nonprofit organization for women's education. They asked me to join their series called Standing Up After the Shadows. Not as a victim, but as a survivor who had redefined her own future. The first time I stood on stage and saw people quietly wiping away tears, I realized I wasn't telling just my story anymore. I was speaking for hundreds who hadn't yet found the strength. That night, I came home, opened my laptop, and pulled up the folder titled Family. I didn't delete the old photos. I simply moved them to an external drive and renamed the folder Lesson Learned. No bitterness, no nostalgia, just the understanding that I didn't need to carry everything forward to move on. That weekend, Owen suggested we visit his mom in Oregon. I hesitated, but he gently took my hand and said, "Don't expect anything. I just want you to know that family can also be where you're loved the right way." I nodded. Not because I needed to be healed, but because I was ready, not for the past, but for the future. It had once been a shadow in my own home, but now I stood in the light, not because I had found it myself. Lily's story resonates deeply, showing that freedom starts when we set firm boundaries. It's a stark reminder that no one should be reduced to a resource for others' irresponsibility, and families shouldn't justify unfairness. Strength isn't just enduring, it's walking away, standing tall, and claiming a life that's yours. Many readers have shared how Lily's courage to break free echoes their own struggles with family favoritism or unreciprocated sacrifice. Others admire her resolve to redefine her worth. Lily did it, and so can you. Have you ever faced a moment like Lily's, caught between family expectations and your own need for freedom? What choice did you make? Share your story in the comments, we'd love to hear it. Follow for more powerful tales of family, resilience, and finding your own path.